Doc, need one. One roger.
521.
You start me a card for a parking problem.
And for your 23.
Yes, that's for I'll get a 28 from one truck when you're ready.
Go ahead.
Here's a one truck, Boy Lincoln X-ray 985, should come back up and heading slowly.
Oh, yeah, that's 2000. Patrick Spalding.
10-4. If you can just put a little note on the log that I'm going to be leaving a note on his vehicle advising him to remove it.
Fuck. Fuck.
Welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we have Ruth Driscoll, who is she's a life liberator, and she's actually a coach that helps working with people who are in toxic relationships. You consider yourself the toxic relationship expert?
That's correct. Yes, yes.
So
wherever that relationship shows up in someone's life, really.
yeah, and so this series is about domestic violence awareness.
Right.
And what I think would be, tremendous for you to help us with is a lot of people are in relationships. And I know when I was in, my abusive relationship, so I grew up in a violently abusive household. So it was, lots of physical violence and some emotional and mental, but mostly physical. And so when I got old enough to date, I swore that I would never, get into a relationship with a man who ever laid a finger on me. And I didn't. What I ended up doing was getting into a relationship with a man who was emotionally abusive. And so, honestly, it wasn't even until years after that relationship was over that I actually realized that I had been in an abusive relationship. And so, we go through life, and in every single person that we come in contact with, whether it's, for a minute, for a day, for a month, whatever, it's a relationship. And there are a lot of different signs that people exhibit in, these relationships that it could be considered toxic. But a lot of times we have a tendency to rationalize the behavior or, try and explain away what's going on or what they're doing so that, it seems normal. And so, what are some things that people could look for specifically before they kind of fall down the rabbit hole and get too far into these relationships, that so that they could kind of cut and run, quickly before they end up, sucked into this relationship that they really just can't get out of?
Yeah, it's interesting that you said, that it was only years later that you realized that what you were actually in was an abusive relationship. And it's amazing how common that is. Quite often I have people approach me and they're saying, Ruth, I think I'm in an abusive relationship. And for people on the outside, they would think, well, surely you would know. But that's an indication of how complex this is. And it's, as you say, you get sucked down into that rabbit hole. And it's when you're right inside that rabbit hole that you realize something's wrong here. But the problem is, you're then in the worst possible place to be able to do anything about it, because that grip that person has over your life, particularly when it's your personal partner, which is obviously, what we're discussing here. So yes, and I think the great thing is that we do have much more of an understanding these days of that idea of coercive control. In the UK, that it's now an illegal act to coercively control people. So, but as you say, it's what do you look out for? How can you know that this is happening to you? And of course, the problem can often be that it's only once you're trapped inside it that you realize something is wrong. And so recognizing the red flags early on is quite difficult. One of the ones that may seem quite surprising is that the whole relationship seems to move at quite a pace. It's like when you discover this person, they're like the most perfect person. They're absolutely the right person for you. And they appear to be as caught up with you as you are with them. And so it moves really quickly to that level of a commitment. Now, a coercive, controlling person needs to have that commitment from you, because it's then that they recognize they've got that grip over you. And that's what feeds the need that they have to feel empowered. So if you're in a relationship that feels like, we talk about it like the whirlwind, the fairy tale whirlwind.
Yeah.
And that sounds absolutely wonderful. And everyone's thinking, I'd love that to happen to me. But it may be fine, but it is one of the red flags. And if it's moving at a pace where, suddenly commitment is pushed along quite quickly. And along with that, you will also have things like they seem to want to be with you all the time, or they're needing to know where you are all the time. So somebody who is constantly checking up on you, and again, in the early throes and the whirlwind and the magic of that romance, that feels rather sweet, that somebody cares about you so much. They want to know where you are all the time. They want to spend as much time as they can with you. But you've got, and yes, it may be magical. It may be wonderful. We don't want to destroy, something that is magical and wonderful. But however, you've got to have that little alert button, that little something that may just slightly kick in with you, where you think that doesn't feel quite right. And this is where it's learning to really trust that gut instinct that you have. It can sometimes feel like just a little kick. And every time I've ignored that little, when my gut gives me that little kick, every time I've ignored that, I've come to regret it. And so now I know that it's something that we must trust. It's a sort of, an instinct that's within us, that in our busy world, our world of, all the influences of social media and TV and advertising, we've kind of learned to ignore it. Yeah. But it's there for a reason. So anything that kicks at you and you think, hang on a minute, or, like that person is constantly texting and saying, well, where are you? And, I don't want you to go out tonight. I want you to stay in with me. And something inside you think, well, hang on a minute, I'm only going out with my mate. I'm just, I'm going to do something. If you feel that little kick, then make sure you listen to it, and then get your antennae right up high and alert and see what else may be happening here. Yeah. So, there's those things. And also, know what is it that you know about this person, because quite often their past might be a slightly nebulous thing. You don't get to meet the people that they've been involved with in the past. Maybe they don't seem to have much in the way of friends, but there'll be a sob story behind that. There'll always be a reason why it was somebody else's fault. The other person didn't understand. Gosh, it's only since I've met you, I realize how bad the other stuff was with my other partner. You really understand me. You're the one, you just get me. You absolutely get me. And of course, what they're doing there is they're saying all the right things to make you feel there's something absolutely special about you.
Yeah, I know it's really hard, especially with the so I really always trust my gut. Like, I mean, and it's never ever led me wrong. I mean, and it's kind of funny because a lot of people don't realize. So anybody who's been around dogs, whenever a dog comes around a person who is not a good person, their hackles are immediately up. Their hair will bristle and they might start a low growl. And so whenever I come around someone who immediately I realize or recognize as being untrustworthy, like that's how I feel.
Wow. Yes.
And it's crazy because I'm like, okay, yeah, no, I'm going to stay away from this person. I'm not going to talk to this person. But again, when you're in these relationships or you're getting into these relationships, a lot of times they make you feel like you're the most important thing in the world. And, the world revolves around you. And, you just feel special and you feel so loved and cared for. And so it can be really easy to ignore that. And you're like, well, it's kind of leading me a little, it's telling me like maybe I should pay attention, but he's acting so nice and
Yeah.
he's doing all these things that are so great and he's saying all the right things. And our brain and our gut, they're like conflicting. One saying, whoa, hold on, pump the brakes, and the other one's like, but everything's so awesome, why would I even try that? So how can we reconcile between the two conflicting signals, right? So again, our gut's telling us, whoa, slow it down. And our brain's like, no, this is so awesome, we need more.
Yeah, absolutely, Crystal. And it's interesting what you were saying there about, the animal instinct that's there. And that's what our gut instinct is. It is an animal instinct. And indeed, you may well find that although you think this person is the be all and end all and absolutely wonderful, there may well be members of your family or friends that, they don't seem to have that same feeling about him. They might say, well, I'm not really sure that this person is right for you. And as you say, Crystal, we ignore that, but because we're so caught up in the romance of all of this. And it is very difficult for you at this stage, when you're caught up in that whirlwind, in the way in which this person seems to be ticking all the right boxes for you, doing and saying apparently all the right things. It's very hard to then actually analyze, well, what really is happening here? When you look back on it, what you realize is that you are inadvertently showing that person all of the emotional buttons that they can press with you that get you into that place where you are just lapping up everything that they are saying and doing. And that's because, when we go into a relationship, we're very vulnerable, really, but we go in and we want to give to that person all of our trust, our love, our support, and it's like we're giving them that in a gift box, and you would anticipate that you should be valued and treasured for that. But what you find is that gradually that box is crushed, and all of the wonderful things about you are being crushed by that person. So the minute that you recognize something is not quite as it should be, that's the time that you've got, I can sort of almost pinpoint the turning point in the relationship with my toxic ex. There was one day when something happened that really sort of almost sent me backwards in terms of the way that he came across to me, the attitude, the behavior, the way he spoke to me. But I did, as you were saying at the beginning, Crystal, I thought, oh, it's just a blip. He's under stress. Maybe it's that. But now, I know that was the turning point. That's the time when suddenly, the Mr. Wonderful was starting to become more and more faint. But you keep the trouble is, and this is again an important thing to recognize, that although you stay there because you're hoping that all that wonder will return. You know, that you had something beautiful, something amazing, something perfect. So every time that it seems to disappear, it crushes you. And then you're hoping, okay, you know, it'll come back again. And what will happen is it's like you're being played like a fish on a line.
Mm-hmm.
That when that abusive person feels you moving slightly away because of their attitude, they will come back and be the perfect person again. So it's recognizing that pull on the line that you are undergoing. But the reason that you stay is because of all of those things that happened right at the start, where you thought it was going to be perfect. And now gradually your self-esteem is being eroded by that person. So then you reach that point where you start to mistrust yourself, your own judgment. You actually end up in a situation where you don't even know who you are anymore. You've forgotten who you are because you're so busy treading on the eggshells around this person to try to make sure that the wonderful bit comes back, the wonderful bit stays.
Yeah, and I know that, you know, a lot of people, particularly people in abusive relationships with where the abuser has a substance abuse problem, and they're perfectly fine when they're not drinking or when they're not high or whatever. And, you know, they rationalize like, well, you know, if he, when he's not drinking, he's fine. Or when she's not high, she's fine, you know, and they're not always high. So, you know, the little bits where, you know, when they get high or they get drunk and they act out, and then when they're sober the next day, they're so apologetic. And then, you know, the nice person comes back and they're like, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean it. And then again, you know, like you said, we hold out hope that things are going to change. And we also feel like we can make them change, and we really want them to change. But one thing that I try to make people understand, as someone who is a recovering alcoholic, unless that person wants to change, unless they make the choice to change, nothing you can do will ever make them change. No matter how hard you wish, no matter how hard you try, they will never change for anybody but themselves. And that's just the reality of it. But we hold out hope so much that, you know, things will be better. Like I have someone I know who got into a relationship with someone who they knew beforehand that this was how this person was. Like, you know, he had done this in a prior relationship and then, you know, abandoned children. And she was like, oh no, he's changed, you know, he'll change for me and it'll be so different and it'll be awesome, because they went through the honeymoon phase and he was being perfectly awesome. And then all of a sudden he becomes the same person he was before. And I mean, it took her years to figure out like how to get away, because by that time she has a couple kids and she's, you know, financially dependent on him. And, you know, I felt terrible because you see it happening and you warned her ahead of time and she still chose to do it. And it's like, I don't understand, you know, how you can think that this is going to happen. And finally she realized that you know, he wasn't going to change because he's just who he is. And a lot of times we're just unwilling to accept that people are who they are, and we need to just let them go sometimes and move on with our lives. So when people are in these toxic relationships and they finally get to the realization that it is a toxic relationship, how do you think that the best way for them to actually extract themselves from the relationship is? Because I know sometimes it can be really, really difficult.
Oh, absolutely, Crystal. It's very, very difficult to get to that point of realization that this isn't going to change. And of course, you know, the message that you received from that other person, it's as you were saying, they make you think that you are the answer, and that without you, you know, they can't continue, they can't survive. And it's almost like what you might describe as an emotional blackmail that can keep you there. And that's because, you know, it's so much easier for somebody who has a problem with substance abuse to put the blame for that problem or the responsibility for that problem onto another person, and usually that's their, you know, their partner in life, who then carries the burden then of possibly the guilt around them, saying, well, you know, if you leave me, I may as well just kill myself. You know, things like that are the kind of things that can be said. But the emotional blackmail can also be far more subtle than that as well. And so it's coming to that realization where you have to accept that whatever that person is saying to you, you are actually not the one who is responsible for their issue. You're not responsible for the problem that they have, and you're not responsible for finding the solution. As you rightly say, Crystal, people with a substance addiction, they can only find that solution when they come to that realization themselves. And so for you, if you know that you are in a relationship like this, and you're feeling that that pull of the emotional blackmail that's making you not trust your own conscience around things, that make you feel like you would be the most awful person if you left them to cope with it. Well, to put that in a very different way, you have to look at the fact that the more you stay there and they're able to put the blame, the responsibility, the responsibility for a solution onto your shoulders, the more you're enabling that problem. And so, you know, really, for all you think you are helping that person,
yeah,
twist it on its head and see that actually what you're doing is you're not helping them, you're enabling them to continue with the pattern of behavior that has been in place with them for many years. So you have a responsibility to yourself. A toxic relationship is denying you from being who you fully are. A toxic relationship is preventing your choices in life. It's preventing you from perhaps being able to contribute very successfully in other ways. If you have children, you know, you're modeling for your children how somebody does not allow or allows somebody to invade their personal boundaries on a continual basis. And that's not good modeling for them to see as they're moving forward in their lives. They need to see that you are able to put your point of view across with what I call elegant assertiveness. So it's a very safe way of being able to put your point of view across, but stops that other person from invading your personal boundaries and feeding. It's like they're almost feeding off your strength. And as such, it means that, you know, they are not then taking any kind of responsibility over what they are doing, and that's unhealthy for them. You can still support them, but it doesn't mean to say that you allow them to take over your life, that you allow them to be the sole purpose for any decisions that you make in life. You have your life to live, and it's important that you're able to do that. And if you're doing that in a way that is positive, that is compassionate, that is contributing to our world, then you're doing the right thing. And the other person needs to know that they can't feed off your strength whilst they continue with their problem, particularly if it is an addiction problem.
Yeah, and I love way you said that any toxic relationship is a relationship that prevents you basically from being you, from,
Yeah.
living your life, because basically when you're in a toxic relationship, you end up living life for somebody else.
Yes.
And um yeah, it's so interesting because I've never actually thought of it that way before, because a lot of the people that I work with, so I consider myself a self-empowerment coach, and I teach people to take their power back and to stop doing things for everyone else and to stop trying, because that's how I was. I was a people pleaser,
Yeah.
a neurotic people pleaser because of the abuse when I was growing up and living with a narcissist. Which is a whole nother type of toxic relationship.
Yes.
Because I ended up becoming a typical overachiever because of the narcissism and because of the abuse. And I realized that I was making myself sick, like literally killing myself for other people. And when I realized what I was doing to myself and that I wasn't happy, that was when I decided to make some changes and really start, putting in boundaries. And so you talked about elegant assertiveness. So how would somebody practice elegant assertiveness?
Well, that's about understanding how you are able to safely put your point of view across. Assertiveness. People think assertiveness is a matter of conflict, that you're stating your viewpoint. But if you think about it, on a scale of communication, if you put at one end of that scale the sort of autocratic type of communication, and right at the bottom you put that passive, people-pleasing accommodator, and then in the middle you put assertiveness. Now, assertiveness means that you are able to respect the other person's viewpoint, but it means that you're also very firm and strong and determined in a very calm way about your own viewpoint as well. So you're able to explore a situation from a variety of points of view. You're flexible enough to be able to make some changes or adapt or go for compromises on things. But there will be certain things that are your deal breakers. And that's something that you decide in advance when you explore your own values and what are the things that you feel there's no way that this person is going to invade on this value of mine. But then you're able to express that in with a clarity and with a confidence and with a calmness that stops that other person from being able to continue to push. The important thing to remember, this is a good one to kind of write down and stick on your computer, and that is that a bully is looking for a victim, not a challenge.
I love
So
that.
yeah, and so this is, someone can only treat you in that way if you have, without realizing you're doing it, allowed it to happen. And
Right.
this was a key message that that I learned. I actually got out from my abusive relationship at this point, and then it was only then I really started talking about it, because you hide it, or you don't talk about it with other people. And I was talking about it with a friend, and the friend said to me, she said, "Ruth, how could you let that happen to you?" I thought about the way she'd expressed that. I thought, my God, she's right. How could you let that happen to you? Not how could that happen to you?
Mm-hmm.
How could you let that happen to you? And that's what, that was like one of those big light bulb moments for me. I went, oh my God, she's right. It couldn't have happened to me if my personal boundaries had been stronger.
Yeah.
If I had had more respect for myself, rather than allowing this person to be continually invading. for me, absorbing the negative messages that he was giving me about myself, which left me feeling so confused. How could you think that about what I said or did, when what I meant was the complete opposite?
Right.
And of course, it's only looking back on all of that I see, what was going on. At the time, I didn't know, which is why, I do the work that I do now, because now I can come from that empowered place, from that educated place, to be able to support others to know how you can recognize what's happening to you, and exactly what you can do about it. I teach you exactly what you can do, down to minute detail, so that I need to be able to guarantee that people can do this safely. That the bully, the controller, actually hasn't got a clue what the difference is. The only thing that they know is that the power that they exerted over you, suddenly it's like, what happened to that? It's like, some big balloon has been blown up, and suddenly someone's let go of it, and it's good all around the room.
Yeah.
That's their power.
Yeah, so it's interesting too, because a lot of times we don't realize when we're in these relationships, like you said, one of the things that I work with my clients on is acceptance. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times what keeps you in the victim role is you're unwilling to accept that this is something that happened, or that you played a part in it, that, not that you deserved it, because nobody deserves that, but that you were a willing participant, regardless of whether you thought you were or not. And once you can get past that, then you can move forward with your life. But a lot of people, especially people from the outside looking in, because like your friend said to you, I can't believe you let that happen. And a lot of people say, why does she stay? Why does she stay? Or why does he stay? Or why do they put up with it? And it's because, the abuser, they really work hard to undermine your self-respect and your self-worth. And so you believe eventually that you do deserve it. Yeah. And, that you start to question your reality, like, well, maybe I did say something that was wrong, or maybe I did do something wrong. And so you start to question yourself, and you start to question your own reality. Like, I had somebody yesterday, and it triggered me, like severely triggered me, because because of something that he saw in a video of mine. He accused me of being an abuser. And so that triggered me back to because my abusive relationship was a controlling relationship, and everything I did was wrong. I couldn't do anything right. And so now I spent the entire day yesterday crying and like trying to figure out, did I do something wrong? Maybe I am an abuser. Maybe, maybe I'm completely wrong. And so I went through, and I actually took a test, like, am I an abuser? And the test said no, like I didn't answer yes to any of the questions. And so then I'm like, why am I believing this guy? So obviously this guy is an abuser, but he's trying to make me feel like, because I'm trying to out him or expose him, he has to do whatever he can to, to shift the blame and put it on me. And it's sad. It's truly sad how this can happen, even after you're out of their relationships. Like I haven't been in an abusive relationship in almost 20, well, it's actually been more than 20 years. And he can just say one thing, and I'm like questioning everything. It's crazy how that can happen.
Yes, and the important thing there is to realize, because as soon as you'd said that about what he'd said, I thought, right, okay, he's projecting onto you what he recognizes is what he's doing himself. And as you said, he's probably an abusive person, and that's a key thing, because that's where you are left feeling like, you're the person who's mad here. You're the crazy one. You're the one who's responsible for all of these things. And it's bewildering because you have no idea how or why. But it's recognizing that is a tactic that is used by these controlling, manipulative people, that they will project onto you the problem that they know that they have. They will never admit to it. It's not something that they would ever be overt about, but they'll have a sneaking suspicion inside that they are, rather an unpleasant person. When I was with my toxic ex, it was really, I was so confused and really mistrusting my judgment about everything. And it was only when, one day I suddenly thought, do you know what? Everything that comes out of your mouth has either been manipulated, twisted, or exaggerated. And it was only when I had that realization that I suddenly thought, no, it's not me who's mad. He's just dumping onto me all of the things that he is responsible for. These are his behaviors that he's making me feel that I'm the one who's putting in place.
Yeah.
When the opposite was completely true. I only ever gave him support and kindness and love. And then it's very bewildering when that's not reciprocated.
Yeah.
So yes, it is another thing to really look out for when you are being accused of something that even though you're mistrusting yourself, darn well it's not true, that it's realizing that they are dumping on you what they know is their issue. They just, that's the thing with these controlling people, they cannot accept responsibility for anything. And once you start to see these patterns, it's like, it all becomes so clear. You see so clearly what they're doing. And that's when you can start to have a little bit of fun, predicting what's going to happen. So, because it's important that, you build a little bit of joy and a little bit of a sense of fun back into your life as well, because most of that will have been destroyed by that toxic person.
Oh, I know. It can be really, really difficult to get back your self-respect and your self-esteem and your self-worth, because I know
takes a while.
When I got out of my relationship, I just felt useless and worthless. Like, what's the point,
Yes.
So,
and that's where you've got to start saying those positive affirmations to yourself, putting them in the present tense and just telling yourself, even if you don't believe it at the time, but each morning, look in that mirror and tell yourself, I am worthwhile, I am lovable, I am beautiful, all of those things that have been crushed out of you. Because your subconscious mind will work on those. Exactly. And that's why it's important that you're getting yourself strengthened up again. But it does take a while. You're not used to looking after yourself. A lady that I was working with yesterday, she's been away from her toxic ex. They're going through divorce. She's been away from him a year. But they share 2 children, so she still has contact with him, and of course the divorce. And that's what she was saying. She said, I can't get him out of my head. So I've put her on a plan of, nurturing herself and pampering herself a little bit, and just recognizing that you're important too, and that looking after yourself and your emotional well-being is a very important aspect of the recovery from this. Because it's like you have been through, you can't under-exaggerate this. It's like you have been through a serious trauma. Even if you haven't been physically punched or beaten, you have been through an emotional trauma. And it's only when I look back on my relationship that I realized I probably had an emotional breakdown. At the time, you're just trying to cope and live through and get on with things. At the time that all this happened to me, I was head teacher of a challenging inner city primary school. So dealing with very tough situations every day and, dealing very effectively with them, just not applying them within my home environment. But after I got out of my abusive relationship, my health really suffered badly, and I had to go on a sort of long-term sick leave, just assuming I would at some point go back to my role as head teacher. And every so often, every couple of months, I had to go to visit HR, the human resources, to, assess how I was doing. And I'd go in thinking, I'm absolutely fine, everything's great. And I'll be back in my role, maybe next week I'll be back again. And I go in, and the HR lady would say, so how are you? And I go, I'm absolutely fine. Honestly, I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me whatsoever. I'm so fine. What's going on? I'm fine. It's like, where did that come from? So it takes a while for all of that to sort of work through.
Right.
But you've got to recognize that you have been through a trauma. And even though on the surface you may look like you're coping, it's as you say, just certain little things can trigger you again. And that's where you realize there is still a residue that needs to come out, needs to be worked through. And needs to be brought to the surface so that it can be eliminated. And then you can move forward and recognize then what happens when a trigger comes up. You're more ready to deal with it, and it doesn't affect you adversely. That you know exactly what's happening with that, and you know why. So, because that's important, that you're able then to move forward in complete freedom over the choices you now make in your life.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time today, and I thank you so much for your wisdom and everything that you're doing. It's amazing that there are so many people, since I started this project, realizing just how many people there are out there who have been through traumatic relationships, who are working with people. Now they've come out of the relationships and they've done the working on yourself to make yourself better. And now realizing that, you have gifts to give the world because, I'm assuming, are like me, you've been through this and you've suffered, and now you want to help other people to not suffer the way you suffered, or hopefully not as long as you suffered. And so, I truly appreciate the work that you're doing in the world. And for anybody that's watching, I'm going to share all of Ruth's information in the link description, so you can find her on her website and on social media. And, if you're interested in the work that she does, which it sounds like amazing work, you can find her on the internet and, spend some time working with her and get yourself to the point where you can elegantly assert that you are an amazing person and, work through things in life, because assertiveness is a skill. And as women, we're not taught to be assertive. We are taught to be quiet and unassuming, and, to just be meek and mild. And so for women, it's something that's completely foreign. And I think it's something that it's so needed. We need to learn to be far more assertive and telling people that this behavior is unacceptable. The way you're talking to me is unacceptable. You overstepping my boundaries is unacceptable, and that it's okay to tell people that this is unacceptable and to learn how to say no.
Yes, absolutely. And to be able to do it safely, because that's what stops you a lot of the time, this grip of fear that person, that bully in particular, again, as I say, wherever that person shows up in your life, that grip that they have over you of fear. I've actually done a TEDx talk, Don't Let Fear Interfere. So.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Well, I'll have to find the link for that and share that too.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
In the description, so people can check that out. So, check Ruth out on the internet. And, thank you so much for joining us today. I truly appreciate your time. It's been a tremendous blessing talking to you and hearing your story and hearing about, the things that you help people to do. And, just keep doing the work. And that's all we can do is, help one person at a time. If this helps one person change their lives, and then, our work is done.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Oh, absolutely. And I think that's the key message, that people think they're stuck in that situation. Believe me, it's very, very possible to be able to turn this around and get your life back. Your life liberated. Where is it? Where's my liberator?
There you go. I love it. Thank you again so much. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much, Crystal. It's been wonderful.